Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cash Up, which is to be a weekly show where we're going to converse with amazing folks in DFIR, and today is no exception. Today I'm joined by the amazing Brett Shavers, an examiner, an author, runs the website DFIR Training. So, welcome, Brett. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Excellent. Really, really happy to be chatting with you today. So, for people who don't know who you are, would you mind giving us a little bit about how you got here where you are in digital forensics?
Well, I took the normal path of not having a clue of what I was doing, and then I somehow ended up here. So that's pretty much the short version of it. But the less short is being in law enforcement and investigating crimes. There was a couple incidents of close calls. I did a lot of undercover work, and one of the close calls had a gun in my stomach, and I started thinking there's got to be another way of making money to survive. So I figured a computer would never kill me. So that was my path to get into something with computers. So we sort of ended up here with that day.
So coming from a very real experience in law enforcement and finding other ways to help in law enforcement that did not involve being killed by computers. I mean, Terminator, they're possibly in the future. Maybe our profession won't be as light. Um, so moving into where are you now? What do you do now in forensics?
Civil cases, no more criminal cases. So it's all civil, which you would think may be boring. And well, I guess you look at both, I see both sides. On the criminal side, the cases may sound exciting on the outside, but it's almost exactly the same as a civil case. You're still looking at the same artifact. You're still trying to prove something. Was this person at this device doing these things civilly or criminally? So I'm doing it on the civil side. So technically it's the same. Physically it's the same. Testifying is the same. Reports are the same. Still got to swear that this is the truth, the whole truth, and you're looking for the truth. So the excitement is the same, which is really not that excited until you're finding something that you go, oh my gosh, it's kind of like being an astronaut for NASA. You work all your life and you're doing 20 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 minutes of excitement of the liftoff. So that's kind of what the forensic world is, I guess, whether criminal or civil.
Right. You're staring at data, you're staring at hex, you look at all the things you know, you're still not seeing it. And then you have that aha moment. And those moments on cases are like what makes it. Is there one of those instances where you had that kind of moment that you could share with us?
Almost every case, really, unless it's a really easy case where it's not even forensics. You pull open the image and you say, well, there it is. And you validate it and say, yeah, that's pretty much the first 5 minutes. That was easy enough. And sometimes the clients will tell you, this is where it should be. This is the person. The person will say, yes, I did it. And it's right there. And you look at it and you go, yeah, you're telling the truth. But on the other cases where they're harder, where someone is saying, no, I never touched that computer, that device. I never sent that email, all those things. And then you dig down in there and you find it. Almost all of those are those aha moments of, yeah, I got it. This is the one, and you validate it with something else just in case you can disprove this artifact, but you're not going to disprove these 4 or 5 that correlate that. So those are all, every time is a neat moment.
That's such a great point, right? Because we were actually chatting before we got online and we were talking about how it's important to have multiple artifacts to validate things and such a key. And for people who don't know, like you truly are the expert in providing that information as to how we all learned how to really put that user behind the device and the criticality of that. And for anyone who's not familiar, like I mentioned, Brett's written, what, 6 books? A few. Everything from the X-Ways Practitioner's Guide with Eric Zimmerman to 2 things I really want to call out if you're not familiar with them. They're Hiding Behind the Keyboard, which he wrote with John Bear, who John Bear, by the way, writes one of my favorite mobile forensics book, if you haven't seen it, but this book, and a little bit older, Placing the Suspect Behind the Keyboard. And the thing I loved about these, if you haven't read these, is that they really do focus on case studies and how you technically show that the user's behind there. And one of the other cool things is you've actually also done this as a series.
Yes, it's. I think I've always done case studies because, well, being in the Marines, you know, when you go to, or at least, you know, my experience of the Marines is every time I'd get a new job, a new unit, I'd have a turnover folder. And somebody would give me a turnover folder. And if you don't know what a turnover folder is, it's basically, this is how you do your job, step 1 to step 100. And the previous person pretty much puts together your job for you. And they update it while they're in it. And then you get it and you kind of do the same for the next person. So I went through that when I was 17 in the Marines, and I go to law enforcement, and I learned there are no such things as a turnover folder. So I made turnover folders for my NARC position and different positions. And you know, to pass it on, and whether it's still going or not is different. But us doing case studies is the same thing, because in my turnover folders, I'd get a new case, and I'd say, how do you do this case? And the answer I would get would be, I don't know, just go figure it out. It's like, oh gosh, there's got to be an easier way to do things. And that's where I would look at someone else's case. I'd go downstairs, pull a little case jacket, and I'd go through it, and I'd say, oh, this is how they did it. This is how they did it. And I'd go, you know, and that's what I do with forensics too, is I pull forensic cases, and I look at it. And even though I can't find, I use this software, this artifact, I get a general overview of, well, this is what they did. I can guess what tools they use, or typically how they got there. And then I can adjust the way I do things based on what they do. So that's my version of doing case studies. And I just make it publicly in videos how I go through it. So I think it's really important. And that's why I want to make sure everybody reminding, look at other people's cases in a positive manner, not in a negative, how you want to tear somebody down, but learning from people's mistakes and how they do things better.
Sharing is critical, right? Because there are too many artifacts, there's too many operating systems, there's too many applications for us all to know how to do things. And what you really bring to it that I love is the so what, right? Like it being, if for anyone who doesn't know, that some commonality that Brett and I have is we both were in the Marine Corps, and you really, I was always emphasize this concept of the bluff, the bottom line up front, right? What is it? Give that so what, and then go into the technical details. And the fact that you share that so what really helps with people having starting points at learning how to apply artifacts. Like, it's really keen to know what a jump list is. It's really awesome to understand all the intricacies of knowledge CDB. But what it means and how it applies in a case is the conceptual marriage that's needed in order to show things. And also, it's not just understanding the artifact, it's understanding what the artifact doesn't show.
Right. But one thing on the first book that placed in such kind of keyboard, that the inspiration came, when I was doing narcotic work, and I had a new partner, and he turns to me, you know, he's a great partner, that one of the best I've ever had. And Mark turns to me and he goes, he has his case, a patrol arrest case, and crack cocaine was found in the car, and there's 2 people in the car. And he turns to me and he's responsible for this case. Does it go to prosecute for charges? What do you do? And he looks, one or both or neither possessed the crack because it's in the center console. He goes, who do I charge or what? And I looked at him and I go, that's a darn good question. I go, I think we have to probably really look at this case. And so I started thinking, you know, there's so many cases like that where you have one piece of evidence, but how do you pin it on a person? Whether you may have 2 innocent people in that car, or 2 guilty, or 1 guilty, picked up a passenger, has no idea. And I thought, yeah, this is a pretty important concept. And you carry that through this with forensics as well, because, I mean, just an analogy of crack cocaine in the car with the person driving the car, you can carry that to a computer that has child pornography on it. You know, well, how do you prove that one person did it? Just saying that, how do you charge somebody with possession of drugs in the car? Maybe the car is not registered to that person, but they're driving it, same as a person's using a phone that doesn't belong to them. And that's where that book came from. So years later, I wrote the book, but that's where the inspiration was. Yeah, we have to prove cases on a person. And if you can't put it on a person, well, you're not doing a full enough job, or you're just not finding the evidence, or the evidence just doesn't exist. But you had to put it together on the actual person.
It's all about finding that truth, right? Just
Right.
because there's evidence there doesn't mean it belongs to the person until you associate it. And I just think it's brilliant and such a critical thing. Something else I love that you do that you've just mentioned, right? So you've written books. I mentioned DFIR training. I'll show that in a second, so everyone can see the website. And you mentioned your videos that you do. And what I love is that you share in a variety of mediums because people all learn and consume data differently. Um, what are kind of your thoughts on why or how you choose to share things?
Um, I think it takes me longer to learn new things. It feels like it. It feels like I spend a long time to do things, and it's either because I'm either slower to get it or I just want to know enough of it before I say I'm competent in it. And I give myself 2 years to do anything. And I go back to detectives when I was doing investigations. You know, for 2 years, there's almost a day I can point out where I sat in the desk and I go, oh my gosh, I think I finally got it. I think I know how to do this job. And forensics is the same way. As you know, it took, you know, I was doing different cases, some forgery cases and some other things, and it was 2 years later that I go, I think I'm getting it. You know, so, but to get there, I'm looking at other people's work. I'm bugging people. I'm asking people. I'm being, I don't think I was being rude, but I was being pushy and being kind of upfront. There was one time I was. This is during the early days of doing forensics, and I'm trying to learn, and there's not that many resources out there, and the books are very few and far between. And Harlan Carvey had one of his books. I can't remember which one of his first books out. And I thought, you know, I'd love to talk to him if he can just give me some guidance or something. And so I found his, you know, his email because he's pretty open with his email. And I sent him an email, and he says, you know, call me. And I called him. And I'm sitting in my detective office. I'm talking to Harlan Carvey. I'm going, oh my gosh. And he's giving me some inspiration without really knowing it. And I've talked to him since. We've known each other well since then, and he doesn't remember this phone call. But I tell him all the time, I go, that phone call is what did it. I go, if not for that phone call, I probably would still be doing undercover narc work with somebody by now. But it was just that inspiration of, yeah, you don't know what you said, but I do, and that's what got me here. So I want to do that for others too, because, you know, forensics is not for everybody, and that's fine because I'm not made to be an astronaut. I would love to go in space, but I'm not going to spend 18 hours a day prepping for a launch because it's not me. But for this, I will. And I think other people who want to be in this field, they could really use something to inspire them. So if I can, I will. You know, and for people who don't want to be in this field, it's good to know what you may not like in this field. So I will do that too.
Absolutely.
So that's the reason why I'm an open book. People ask me questions. I go, yeah, this is and if you still want to be in forensics, well, after talking to me, that means you must really want to be in forensics. So I always will talk people out of doing things because when someone tells me, like for joining the Marines, for example, somebody, you know, a relative would say, my son or my cousin, whoever wants to join the Marines, can you give them some information? I say, sure, have them call me. And I will talk them out of it the most that I can. You do not want to go.
Absolutely.
It sucks. It's so bad. You're going to regret it. I mean, you're going to be hot and sweaty. It doesn't matter what job you get. You're going to hate it. If they still want to join, and then I tell them, you're the person that I would serve with. I said, so you deserve to be there. So same thing with forensics. You're going to be, your head is going to be swimming in hex. You're going to hate it. You're going to suffer. You're going to have a lot of hours swearing, throwing things around. And if you still want to do it, then you're the person for this job. So yes, I 100% support.
I love that. I think that is such a appropriate way to talk with people who are interested in learning more about forensics, because if you know how much it takes, if you know the frustration, if you know what it's like to stare at something and not know what it is for hours, and to dream in hex and to be like, wait, oh, it's a protobuf, and to have those moments, it's and to live for those moments and to live for how they fit together, then you're the right person for this. But you have to be willing to dig. And I really like something else you said about how it takes 2 years. It takes 2 years to realize, oh, I can do forensics. And I feel like there's this curve, right? Like I can do I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. You reach this point at like 2 years, you feel like you know what you're doing. And then very quickly you realize you don't know crap. and you never will because there's too much. And then you spend the rest of your career back down here about where you were at about 6 months in terms of how you feel. Best, worst experience ever. So there's actually some people commenting about how responsive you are, that they've reached out to you before and that you're responsive. And I think that's just awesome. I know I've had that experience with you. And, I think something everyone who's watching should remember is that all of us who are sharing content, it's because we want to reach out to us. We're happy to help or answer questions or do something. And I know Brett is amazing at that. So speaking of your sharing, do you mind if I flip and show a little bit of DFIR training and maybe you can tell people about what that is? Why would it want to share the proper screen? So let me go ahead and do this. Start. I'm going to, wrong screen. Look at me. I screwed that up. Sorry, everyone. Now you're seeing my notes. Yeah. This is what happens when things are live. I meant for it to share a different screen, but that's okay. So this is training. I have nothing to hide as far as my notes of what our questions were going to be. And if you can see the page, can you see it, Brett, as well?
I do, yes.
I am going to make sure that I X out of things. This is great. That is not the screen it was supposed to be shared, y'all. And what I love about this site is that it's pretty much a go-to for everything in forensics. So everything from all of the tools you could ever possibly want to resources. And I don't know what your intention was, Brett, but I can tell you some of the things I love is that you have forms and report examples and search warrants, etc., that are just really awesome. I'm going to turn off my back to you. Is that off, Kevin? I'm assuming so. And so I just really love it. So if you haven't seen that website, please check it out. It's just really awesome in terms of the content you can find there. What are kind of your goals with that site moving forward?
That is my turnover folder right there. That's the whole purpose of that. It's a work in progress. There's some things that not yet, just because I just changed the way I was doing it earlier. It just wasn't scaling right, and so I'm just transferring everything over so it's easier to find. Everything's interlinked together. So the intention is, if you're looking for, let's say, prefetch as an example, you can click on a link prefix. You'll get the tools, the small tools besides the suites, that can pull the prefix, a glossary with citable definitions from NIST and everywhere else. And then you also get everything about it, YouTube videos and white papers and court cases and all those things together. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop where you can go and find everything you need for an artifact or a tool or training, so everything's linked together. So looking for training in registry forensics or something particular. And it's a lot for my benefit as much as anybody else's, because it's much easier for me to, I know I have a report example of that. So let me just go to my own website and find it, and just search and find it and refer to it that way. So that's the intention of it, and for everyone else to use it as well, and to take input when people have, because a lot of it is people send me things like regex. I've been getting some good terrorists and send me some good ones, and people sending me some good regex and search term list where if you're doing a lot of keyword searches, and keyword search is not the end all be all, but sometimes you have to do keyword searches for things. So I have keyword search lists. So instead of putting together, let's say, one on data wiping and going online and searching what are the current data wiping tools out there, there's a list you can download. You can import the text file and run the list as it is, and now you have a keyword search for data wiping tools. And those are the sort of things that are on there that anyone can freely use. There's no cost of downloading anything. So.
And I really love those examples. So you mentioned what Tara Melton was helping you with she submitted some PII regex. And I thought that was awesome, that she did that list because she was doing it to help someone. And I think that's really keen. Sharing your content that you do for yourself with others. And if you've been putting together these lists or forms, or you have, Brett, I actually have things I need to send you. I need to send you from, we did a Chromebook Brews and Bites event. It was like a hackathon, and we actually had a legal team that worked on documents for go-bys to put out warrants to Google for cloud data and Chromebooks and the data that can be found specifically related to those sources. And it was written by DA's offices, and it's meant for the public, and I have to send those to you because those are great things. So if you have resources you can share, or things you can, even if you have to redact some information and you can share them with the community, it gives somebody else a starting point. So just thank you for building that resource.
Like I said, it's for me selfishly, but yes, of course. And with sharing it, and as you know, when any great idea is never started with a great idea. It's always because someone comes with a little a peanut of an idea, and that inspires. So by sharing with others, sometimes you get back even more of an idea. Oh, I shared this little thing, but someone else spun off on something bigger. Yeah, that's even better for everybody. So it really does benefit everybody when you share. Not to sound cliche, sharing is caring, but it's selfish and selfishness. Yeah.
And not only that, but when you better the community when you share, and it's almost giving back for all the things that you use, right? None of us have ever gone through doing forensics without Googling something, right? Like I don't care if you're Googling APFS structures and going to Mac Forensics, the Mac Forensics site that Sarah does, or you're Googling, how to parse knowledge CDB, or you're Googling whatever you're looking up, or you even need something to refer to explain something. None of our work is done alone, so it's good to give back when you do something that's novel or new, and there's just too much for any of us to do it alone. So a good place to share stuff is via Brett.
There you go. Well, another thing on sharing which reminds me of a lot of us have a big hesitation to share anything because we're afraid, and I say truly afraid of court. And we're afraid, and not just court in the legal process, being up on the stand and having cross-examination be torture, which it usually seems it's just torture no matter what, because whether you're 100% right, they're going to argue one way or another. So it's going to be hard no matter what. And when you're thinking about, well, if I share what I don't know online, that's going to be brought in against me, and it's going to be torture. It's going to be torture anyway. So I just figure, looking at it both ways, I've never shared before. When I was in law enforcement, I didn't share it. I think, especially working undercover, I didn't share anything at all. But it actually looks better when you are part of the community, an active part of the community. And even if you were to post something that's incorrect, I'm not claiming to be an expert in anything at all. But court does say you can be qualified as an expert, and that's just the legalese of being an expert. Experts know when they are wrong, and even in court, I understand. I posted that in 2015, whatever it is. I was wrong, and I've since learned. I've been told I was wrong, and now I know this is the way it goes. Experts know when they're wrong. The experts who never admit to being wrong, who never show that they're wrong. I can't imagine a doctor. I wouldn't go to a doctor who is never wrong, who has never been wrong, because that means they're just not admitting that they were wrong, and they're not going to improve as much as a doctor who says, "Yeah, we don't do bloodletting anymore. we were wrong, so we do it differently now." So that's for sharing. I really encourage. It doesn't matter what your job is, as long as it's not, national security. Sometimes personal safety, obviously, but if you're just doing forensics, you can share some things that you've learned and get feedback on it, and you can improve your findings with help from the community. So you become better exponentially compared to keeping it to yourself and just Googling, "Oh, I can figure this out by myself. I think I'm right," and going forth that way. Because eventually you're going to be called on the carpet of, "Yeah, you were totally wrong." And you could have been the mastermind of really discovering something new just by sharing. So I'm all about sharing the little things that you can, at least.
And even even if you work, I mean, I worked in an environment for years where I was prohibited from sharing because of my employment. And that can be a case because you work for a large corporation that doesn't want liability. It can be the case because you work in national security. And there are other ways to share. You can share anonymously. You can share a regex list with Brett that doesn't go up under your name. But you can also find other ways to contribute to the community that are outside of that. And I would say one of the cool things about sharing, I mean, it happened today. Not Madhya, was it Madhya? Yeah, Madhya shared something he found on an iOS device and tweeted it out and it's like, hey, has anybody ever heard of it? And within an hour, 4 different examiners were looking at databases they have of that device and sharing the kind of information. And somebody else shared that they're doing a talk on that at DFIR Summit. And what's going to happen is that work is now going to grow because someone shared that they saw something new and interesting. So we can build on each other too. And I just think that's awesome. There are things where, one person does research and Alexis Brignoni writes a tool for it. Right. He's amazing at doing things like that. So that, bringing together different skills and other views is just incredible.
Well, since you brought it up, getting to the community as well as DFIR review is another way to get into the community and help without sharing what you learned or what you come up with. So if you're looking for, it is afraid, it's scary to put anything online, to write that first blog post or write that first book or not just the first blog post, write any blog post or say anything online. It's the only analogy I can think that the feeling is walking down the street bare naked. That's the way it feels. So if you don't have the courage to walk down the street bare naked, which I don't want to walk down the street bare naked, but that's the feeling of sharing your work because you're afraid to be wrong, criticized, attacked, insult. I mean, just a slew of things that normally do happen. With DFIR review, and I'll let you explain it more, you can actually help the community be engaged in the community by reviewing other people's work, putting in input to their work, improving it, obviously criticizing it in a positive manner to make it better. And you'll be instrumental in this work because you may see things and read things in these papers that aren't even published yet that can make a huge difference, not only in that paper that you're reading, but in the way that you do business, the way that you see things. Because I've read a few papers already in a DFIR review that I go, yeah, this is so cool. This is so hot off the press and so neat. I have just taken a new path on how I'm going to do this. So if you want to have insight into the newest and latest and greatest, DFIR review is probably my number one suggestion.
And that's really great. So full disclosure, both Brett and I are on the organizing committee for DFIR review. And really the goal of the project, and I saw that Kevin posted the link there for you guys, for everyone. The goal of the project is to allow for content that's outside of the academic world, practitioner-based content, what we as practitioner community are seeing day to day, or our research is evolving, to go ahead and submit, be viewed by other practitioners and some academics, and published without the process of rewrites and long academic process. I'll give you an example. I did a paper with Dr. Owen Casey and Dr. Alex Nelson that took 14 months to publish. It got published in December, but it took 14 months of review cycles, and those were heavy rewriting review cycles. It was on data recovery, and it was very in depth. It's why you should never say something's deleted. It's basically the premise of the paper, but we went through this academic process because that was what was right for that work. But that's not what's necessarily right for something that's active and is going to change. So Josh Hickman has put up a whole bunch of stuff in the DFIR review around Google, some Google artifacts on Android and Android Auto. Alexis Brignoni has put up posts, Heather Mahalik, Gabrielle Zambelli. So really great people have contributed some really, really cool work there. And then it gets commented and put out. And one of the neat things is it can be an existing blog. One of the cool things that really got me started in this was a forensics examiner was on the stand and was doing a case on a Windows phone and was citing Cheeky Forensics Monkey on the stand. And because that was the methodology she used to parse it. And she asked, hey, Jess, have you ever looked at this device? And I luckily happen to have that Windows phone in my collection, was able to validate and put something out. And I literally validated the steps that Cheeky Forensics Monkey had taken and just gave her a write-up stating it. And that was really it. The judge said, I'm not going to accept this anonymous blog post, but if somebody else reviews the material in the community, I can accept that as your methodology. And so we're able to provide that. So a couple of ways to contribute. If you do have blogs or research, please share it via DFIR review. It will get posted with a DOI number in an immutable format that can share. And I just learned, because we just published Daniel Dickerman's work this way, we can include scripts for download in there, which I didn't know until we did it. And you have a DOI reference in an immutable platform. It is peer reviewed. The peer review comments are shared. So if you blog, that's something you can do. If you don't have a blog and have something new, you can submit it there instead of drafting a blog. And if you want to review, we're always seeking reviewers. We'll look at just your areas of expertise and assign you to things in your areas of expertise. Obviously, they're typically new things, so you won't know the thing anyway. But if you're strong in mobile, we'll send you mobile stuff. If you're strong in networks, we'll send you network stuff. And then you can review and contribute to the community so that these things can be posted, that they've been reviewed and are accurate. And it's just really cool. So thank you for mentioning that, Brett. So speaking of resources, are there any resources you'd like to share that maybe aren't forensics related, or anything that really is like your favorite go-to resource, blog, book?
Oh my. Well, that's a hot seat right there. Actually, my favorite book, I mean, my most favorite book is always the book that I needed at that time.
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
I've had books that I've, well, here's just an example of like going to a conference. What's my favorite conference, or what's the favorite track to take, and that sort of thing. And I can say years ago, I went to a talk by Troy Larson when I first got started. And it's in Seattle, and Troy was speaking this foreign language. I don't even know what it was. I was very, very new to forensics, and all I knew was I had no idea what he's saying. And I'm just taking notes. Whatever I see on the screen, it looks like this. I'm drawing pictures, and it was a great presentation because everybody else liked it. And I just went, I really don't know what's going on. But probably a year later, or probably exactly 2 years later, I sat in my chair. I went, I know exactly what Troy was saying, and that conference presentation became one of my best that I went to at the time, because I needed that information at that day. And it all came back to me of, that's what Troy was talking about. So for books, it's the same way. I'll read a book and I go, this is neat. Yeah, this is okay. And I'll put it down, but it may not be but 6 months later. And I go, oh my gosh, I remember reading that. And I'll grab that book, and that is my hot book that I want to read, that chapter, because I remembered it. So whenever I read any book, I just take mental note of doesn't apply now, but probably will later. And same with presentations at a conference. I go, well, this doesn't apply today, but it probably will apply later. So I don't have a hot resource other than everything is a resource that you just don't know yet. I went to a conference in Portland by Crimes. That's the organization now. I don't know if they still exist, but I went down there, and the guy that was presenting was from AT&T, and this is in the 90s, I think. And he said, mobile phones, cell phones are the future. He goes, this is the future of everything. Everyone's going to have one. And I'm sitting there thinking, I got this big phone. I got a pager. I'm working on the cover. And I go, this guy's crazy. This guy's crazy, right? But I reflect back on that today. I reflect back that often. And I've told that many times since then of, this guy said this 20-something years ago, and he was right. So whenever I read something today and someone says, this is the future, I go, he could be right, or she could be right. So I'm going to put this in the back of my mind, because the day is going to come that I'm going, I definitely remember reading something like that. Let me go back to it and read it. So those are my hot resources, everything that I read. Yeah.
I love it, because that's so true, right? You don't know what you don't know at that time and how it's going to help you later. And so much connecting those dots is what helps us. That's incredible.
Yeah. And in this field too, we don't have a field that you start at A and you learn B, C, D to Z. You start at A, and then tomorrow you're on K, and you're like, what happened to B, C, D? And then you're on Z, and then you're back to C. So until you get a foundation of everything, then you put it all in order. So that's why I try to tell people is, you're not going to know. It's a foreign language, because if you don't speak that language, it's foreign to you. You're not going to understand it, but you'll get bits and pieces of it as you go on, and then it all comes clear, and then you know how much you don't know, and then you start over again.
So based on that, what kind of advice would you give to people who want to get into this field? To somebody who's listening to this and is like, man, I think this is so cool. Despite every scary thing that Brett said, I'm still interested.
Yeah, it's I never say that some people have it easier than others, because everyone has a difficult time to get into this field. It's just the way it is. And I'll say the same thing for medical. If you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a doctor, it's difficult to get in. So I would never say that one doctor is going to say, "Yeah, you had it easier than I had it." Say, well, you both had to go to med school. You both had to get in. You both had to pay for it. You both had to do the time and learn it. So just take time to get in. So the biggest advice is your path is not any more difficult than someone else's. It's just a different difficulty or different degree of difficulty. Some things you're going to have easier. Today, there are so many different colleges with degrees in so many different subfields of cyber, whether it be digital forensics, incident response, and sub parts of all those, that you can really pick what you want. So to be one of the older people where there were no degrees to get in,
yep.
I didn't have a degree to begin with. I didn't have any degree at all, and I was in police work. So for me to get in, there wasn't any college degrees at all. I had to get something different. And there wasn't any training really to speak of. There's a few courses, but there really wasn't that much. There's nothing online, very, very minimal. Warren Cruz had a book. There's a couple other books, reading those. And my agency didn't even have forensic ability. I think the FBI was, but overall there wasn't much there. So for me to get approved for training was zero, as much as I asked. So I paid for my training. I flew on my own dime, did it on my own time, taking vacation. I was doing kind of pro bono work for police officers of my agency. Well, I'm doing undercover work for drugs, but give me a computer and I'll slip that in my 80-hour week too. So, doing those things. And I became a task force officer, with Homeland Security for a few years. And while I was there, I was able to get a lot of training. They sent me to FLETC on the East Coast. I spent months on the East Coast doing, everything. And I just thought, this is amazing. So while I'm doing those courses full time, I'm also doing drug investigations. So in the breaks, I'm on my cold burner phones, making calls to dealers and organized crime, saying, I'm out of town, I'll be back. So the effort that I put in to get in was truly 60 to 80 hours a week sometimes, and your own time and your own money, and fighting the system of telling my department we should really get this because it's coming. So I set up a lab in a closet. It was literally a closet that had brooms in it and stuff. So I cleaned it out. There's our lab. I wrote up a policy, found free equipment and software from FBI grants. And I said, it's all free. It's all written up. Let's try it. And my first case was a nightmare case today. It's a case I wouldn't want to go into today too, but it was a child molestation case, and going inside the house with a search warrant, there was, I think, 26 hard drives, a dozen computers. He had a server in the garage, wires everywhere. He worked for a big tech company here, and it was just so many things. And I just walked in and go, so this job sucks. So I called for help. I called a King County detective does forensics. He comes on scene, and I said, what advice can you tell me? He said, all I can tell you is I'm glad it's not my case. Now, this job really sucks, but that's my entry into it. But working through all the pain and suffering just to get to the point of I can really do some good here. I can find out the truth. People can say this is what happened, but I can find out what really happened. I've seen people who's had their jobs saved because of forensics, people who did not get incarcerated because truly they were innocent with forensics. And on the same side, you can see people save their business because of forensics. So it really is one of the neat things this field has to offer is being able to do justice for people and companies, and that's the neat thing. But just to get there, it's like being an astronaut. You got to suffer for 20 hours a day for a couple of years, bang your head against the wall, throw some things against the wall, put a couple holes in the wall, scream and shout and swear, and say you're going to give up, but just don't. And eventually, 2 years later, you find out how much you do know, and you start over again and just keep building upon those 2 years. 2 years for me, for most people, it's probably 6 months, but for me, it's 2 years.
It's 2 years, I think, is pretty normal, actually, Brett. I think if you're hitting that at 6 months, you've learned a lot very quickly. That's like a lot of competence to gain in 6 months. Or maybe you're in a niche area. Maybe you're doing something highly specific, where maybe it's not as broad. In which case, maybe that's more likely. But wow, no, that's great advice, and 100% the struggle is real. Like, I think you emphasized an important thing. Everyone gets here a different path. There is no right or wrong way to get here, but it's a lot to get in. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of stuff to learn, but you'll get there. You can do it, right?
And there's a lot of excuses too. And I always tell people that everyone's got an excuse. Being a Marines, I think in boot camp, everyone has an excuse, and you know the rest. But basically, everyone's got an excuse. You just have to get over the excuses of, I'm too short, I'm too tall, I don't have this degree, I don't have that degree, I don't have this. Everyone has different excuses. You just have to work around what is holding you back to get there, because we can all get there if you really want it. It just takes time. Even getting hired, you can complain. It's taken me 6 months. I don't have an interview. For me to be a police officer, it took me 5 years. So I was doing every job under the sun for 5 years, applying to, 100 agencies before I was hired by one, and then getting, offers for other agencies. But it's like, man, it took me a long time. Some people can apply for a police agency, be hired in 3 weeks. And I just count that too. Well, everyone is different. Everyone takes different time. And when it's your turn, it's your turn. And when it's not your turn, you just fight to get your turn. And this field is no different than any other field. If you're lucky, you're in right off the bat. If you're lucky, you get a degree, you're hired before you even graduate, you go to a great company, and all is well. But still, there's some things to do to get there. They're different for you than somebody else.
I think what you said is just absolutely monumentally true, and it really does just take the grit and the hard work to get there, right? And everyone's different, and you have to put in the work, but also use the resources, right? Learn about things, use all the tools, go to DFIR.training, read the books, try things, test on your own devices, like learn, do CTFs, do all of that, but it takes work, it takes time, and thank you for emphasizing that, because I think there's some people who are mentioning that they needed to hear that. And there's some mentions here of other people who started their labs in closets. So it's definitely true. It's no easy path. But
there's no perfect path either.
Right. That's right. Right. Like, it's not prescriptive. And every organization hires differently and is looking for different things. So really good sage advice.
And just another example, I guess, what fits in this is, in my department, there was a few of us trying to put together a forensic lab. And one person wanted to put together a lab. He wrote up a proposal, and it was, we need to spend, $50,000 or whatever it is. And I need this and that and this and that, all this other crazy stuff. And I go, I don't think they're going to go for that. So my proposal was, it's all free. I found a closet. I got some software, got some old machines. I'll do this. I'll squeeze the work in. We don't need to designate anybody for anything. Just get it started. And that worked. That got the closet and everything. And even doing the first case, that one case, it took, 40 hours or more just to get enough, what I thought, probable cause to prove some bad stuff. And one of the commanders came up to me. He goes, "This is the first case the department had." And he said, "So how many hours did you spend on this?" And I wasn't the case detective. It was another case detective. And I said, "About 40. And he goes, "Well, the guy admitted, to rape and everything else." And he goes, "He already admitted. So, he confessed everything, and we wasted 40 hours on the forensics." And I go, "Wasted?"
Right.
And I went down the list of charges additional charges because of the forensics. Like, this guy is looking at a millennium in prison. Look at all these charges. And the commander goes, "Oh my God, I never knew." And I go, "Yeah." I go, "This is well spent money and time." And now they're doing forensics after I've been gone, so it's great. It just takes whatever door you can squeeze in, put your foot into that door, and then you work toward what you want. If you're lucky, you'll get that $50,000 check and everything that you want. But most likely, you're going to have that forensic lab on your desk that you're doing your other work on before you can get to that $50,000 lab and software and everything.
You know what? That's such a good point. The start where you are, right? That's part of that no excuses. You can take what you have today and you can use free tools. And to be honest, I think you learn more that way, right? So if you are freaking doing forensics in a hex editor because it's free, you are going to learn so much so quickly because you're forced to do things the manual way. It's probably not scalable. For scale, you probably do want tools and faster computers and resources and automation and everything you need to be able to work at scale so you can then concentrate on the harder problems. But to start, the best place to start is where you are. Grab a computer out of Dermo, right? That's meant for demolition, right? Because find ways to redo things and just start where you are today. If you don't even have a computer, read a book. If you don't search online, just start reading. Even if you can't start using the tools hands-on, now with the virtual environment, there's so much content. Read This Week in Forensics and start picking things that interest you and reading about them. And start gaining that knowledge. The place to start is with what you have.
Which, as far as picking.
Alexis. I'm sorry. Alexis just said if you're at a smaller agency, ask larger ones for surplus equipment.
Yes. Yeah. And free good stuff, not just surplus stuff. Yes. Secret Service is outstanding. There's FBI has grants. Homeland Security. There's some grants. If you're law enforcement, they're awesome grants. Just have. And I'll sneak in my department didn't know a lot of things that was going on for me to get that first lab going. But one of them was a memo that I wrote to the FBI that needed a commander signature, and it was for free stuff. And I said, "This is for free stuff." So he signs it, and we got free stuff. But he didn't really realize what he was signing. I mean, it's on the memo. You're agreeing to these things, but you have to ask to get things. If you don't ask, if you don't look, you're not going to get it. And federal agencies, they have surplus everything for cheap. So ask your local federal friend.
Local federal.
you never know what's sitting in a closet or downstairs in the garage that they'll willingly just sign off to you. And a lot of it they need to get rid of anyway. So when I've seen agencies say, "You want this stuff?" And then I say, "You'll give me this stuff?" So this is the perfect world. I'll take whatever you don't want. And you build from there. It may not be the best, but it will get you that great case that you win in court, that makes the news, that makes your boss happy, that proves innocence for someone else. And that builds upon what you can get next. So then when you ask, "I need this $5,000 software," you bet. If you say so, you got it. That's how you get it. You don't get it from the start. You don't run the marathon in the first day. You have to build up around the block a couple times, and then you build up to the marathon. So it's the same thing with this world too, especially in your job. If you don't have forensics in your job and you want it, if you think it's a good idea in your organization and you can write it up and you can justify it, you're going to have piecemeal it to break the ice rather, and you can get it started that way.
And I think that's such a good point, right? If you start off and go, "We should do forensics in our organization." It doesn't matter if it's corporate, law enforcement, whatever it is, we should do forensics in our organization because you're in a different role in a company. And you turn around and say, "But in order to do forensics, we need a $50,000 check." That is going to get it kicked out the door. And no way is it going to happen. If you say instead, "We need forensics. Here is some stuff I was able to do on my free time with some tools." And I'm not saying people should use their free time to do free work. I'm saying if you're interested in sharing and showing that value, show that value. Say, "This is what I was able to do." And then start getting that work approved. And then as you show value and there's ROI, you can say, "And if I had this tool, this system, I could be more efficient. I could do better. I could, instead of hiring more personnel, we can actually do more with the same we're at, because right now personnel budgets aren't going to get approved, but for less money, we can get some automation in or get some tools in or get a faster CPU or processor or RAM. And you can ruthless incrementalism to eventually get to that lab you want to be in, that dream lab. You can make it happen. Even in an organization that doesn't do, likewise, trying to sidewise into groups that do forensics and orgs that don't.
Right.
It's funny because I'm looking through the chat and I know some of you, and I see a lot of you that I know have done that, have worked your way into the forensics unit or have gotten your organization to build a forensics unit. And I applaud all of you for the hard work to bring more truth.
If you can't make the spot, try to find a spot elsewhere too.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that all applies to getting training approved as well, because it's one thing to have all the equipment and the gear and learn by yourself, but you said scalability. There is a point where without someone telling you their 10 years of experience in 10 minutes, here's 10 years of experience in 10 minutes, that will save you so much time. So if you have the basics down, the foundations, the foundations of forensics, to have someone tell you, oh yeah, I've been doing it wrong for 5 years, and then 5 years later I did this way, and here's an idea how you can do it. It's like, oh, that just saved me 10 years of figuring that part out. So training is important for your organization. And some organizations, or many, when you're hired, they may offer you pick a training class to go to, we're going to send you as soon as you get here, because they know the value of training, because having a week or two of some specific training can save so much time on the back end of what you're doing work.
And you don't know what you don't know, right? So even if you've done all of this research on your own, you've read all the books, the things that you're going to learn when you sit down in a training course with an instructor who knows some specific thing inside out is going to save you mountains of time. It's going to skill you up so much more quickly. And it's going to help that CV for when you testify.
It does. Training does matter. And also with training and talking to people, there's that, I mentioned inspiration, which is it's really important, because you can do this all by yourself in your living room and without saying a single word to anybody, and you can learn, and you can take 10 years to that person, or you can compare the other 10-year person who reaches out, makes a phone call, sends an email, gets online, does those things. The difference in skill and competence and knowledge is going to be, it's crazy. And a lot of it is because if you're listening to someone speak, 90% of it may be really, it sounds fun, entertaining, or whatever, or that doesn't apply to me. But 1% or 10% may be that 1% that really skyrockets you off on some crazy path that you excel in. And it's just because somebody said some word. And this is not just forensics. Like if you're a criminal investigator, you know how this works. You're working a case, you're banging your head against the wall. You just can't, there's something, some roadblock, and you take a step back, you come back with fresh eyes, it's still not good. You ask one person, it's still not good. You get with somebody else, a group of people, and they all look at it, and somebody says one thing. It may not even be related to your case, but as soon as they say it, your brain snaps and you go, oh my gosh, I got it. So that little unrelated snippet, that little inspiration can really solve your whole world's problems. So that's going to training and listening to people. You're hearing, they're bearing their soul. They're telling you what they feel, what they've done, the mistakes that they made. And if there's a mistake to be made in the forensics, I've made it at least once or twice. So when you're hearing people, that can help you excel more than not sharing, not asking, because you can only do so much with Google. Yeah, I Googled the answer. I found this white paper. It's still not fitting what I need. I need something. And like I said, reaching out, asking, sharing, engaging, I think that is the key to go that 1% more, which is a vast difference of skill and competence with people. It's just that 1%.
Right. Like almost all of the work that comes out that is that next level, that's sharing or finding that new artifact, rarely is it done by one person in isolation, right? It's done because we meet at training classes, we meet in Discord, on the Digital Forensics Discord server, we meet in real life at conferences when that happens again. And the conversations that happen, the illuminations from hearing somebody in a training course or hearing somebody's presentation, sparks an idea or a question, and then collaborating with others and just building on that concept. That's how so much of the incredible work that comes out has been done and is just incredible. People build on each other. There is no one in this industry who isn't building on the work of somebody else, unless maybe it's Brian Carrier with like file system analysis initials. But I'm sure that was still building on the work from what is learned in traditional computer science and from, professors and that Brian maybe interacted with. I don't know. I'm not speaking on behalf of Dr. Brian Carrier. I'm just saying it's definitely one of the earlier works, as well as like Warren Cruz's book. The all of this, we are all always building on each other, and that's so important. Thank you so much.
Here's another tip on that networking part, and I'll give it a police experience analogy, I guess, is when I got into detectives to learn drug world, right? I'm going to conferences, I'm going to courses, and while I'm going to these courses, I'm really focused on what I'm being taught. And I'm having other narc detectives telling me, dude, this is about networking. And I'm going, man, I need to learn this job. Screw networking, because this is more important to learn my job. And that's what I did for the first year or so. And I learned quickly that networking in those conferences exponentially increased my work efficiency, my competence, my caseload. I was doing street level drug cases on my own. I can do them confidently because I knew where the work was going. But as soon as I started networking by meeting people, nationwide and some international, and I'm getting phone numbers, I'm meeting people, and everyone's nice. Whenever I needed help with a case, I'd make a phone call across the country, and I would have the world at my fingertips. And the same thing, I get phone calls because someone's doing a case near Seattle, and I'd help them out. And my cases went from doing street drug buys to international organized crime. And I was doing human trafficking. I was doing arms trafficking, a whole bunch of crazy stuff, only because of networking. And with forensics, the same way. When you're going to these conferences, it's great to learn that nugget of, oh my gosh, that saved me so much time. But it's just as important, or actually even more important, to look at the name tag and say, oh, here's my card. Can I email you sometime? The presenters, there's not a presenter in any conference that was not sitting in that chair that you're sitting in. And none of them, any presenter on the stage, they have gone to a presenter in their life, and they have asked. So every one of those presenters have asked other presenters in their career span. And that's what I always say is come up and say hello. If there's a line of people and you don't want to break in, you don't want to be pushy, don't. I mean, you got to wait. I mean, however long it takes, wait and say hello, whether it be say, hey, it's a great presentation, or even if they were wrong, to say, just so you know, this was actually the way I found it, it was different. And that helps the presenter to say, oh, I will never teach that again. I think you're right. I didn't think of that way. So those are great things to have in networking, because you can email, you can comment on their blog, you can say, oh, I remember you from that conference. That's what builds up your community, your competence, your skill. And that's where you end up going where you want to go. You'll have jobs come to you saying, oh, we met at this conference. If you're ever interested, come to work for my company. So that's going to courses and classes is great, but it's also get that list of attendees. If there's a list of attendees in the class, get the list of attendees and contact information. Bring your card, pass them out, get cards back. 90% of people may not be able to help you ever, maybe 99%, but one that does, that's the one that makes the difference. And that's the one that you want to look for. You just don't know who it is yet, right? But you try to find that person by networking, and it's free to say hello. And we're all shy. I'm shy. Everybody's shy. And we're all walking around naked because we're all afraid of being called out with anything we say is wrong. We said it rudely, we offended somebody, we were incorrect in their data analysis. We all are under that. Yeah. But that's what it takes to get better. Share. You put yourself out there. If you're worried about being on the stand and being questioned about something you wrote 5 years ago, don't, because that's proof of that was the 5 years ago me. And me today is totally different. If your today is not better than yesterday's you are not doing good. Every day I can look at myself and say, yeah, I did not know as much yesterday that I know today. And that's how you have to work in this field too. And that's the way you have to look for legal. And I always bring up the legal aspect because you got to testify eventually if you're doing forensics, the legal.
That's the definition.
That's the definition. So you have to be able to say, there's cases that I've done 10 years ago that if I were to redo it today, it would be, this outcome may be the same because the facts are the same, but my report would be clearer. And I was just asked this in a testimony last year of a really old case. And I was asked, if you had this to do over again, what would you do different? And I said, I would use different software because, and that's why, well, today's software is better. Some of that software, that version is old. And actually the software today is better than that software, case by case difference. That I would pick the specific software for the specific case. My report would be better, it would be cleaner, be more concise, and it would actually come up with more evidence than I had 10 years ago because I would know more. If you were to ever answer, oh, I would do it the same way, there's nothing I would change, you are not doing good. That's not the way to do this job. You had to be able to say, yeah, I would probably use different software, maybe the same software, but a new version, of course, but I would probably definitely use some additional new software. And I would look at things a little bit differently because now I know about this artifact. Now I know how this artifact correlates with another artifact. I know about this malware does this. So now I know a lot more than I knew then. So that's part of the DFIR review, is writing what you know now today. It gets stamped, it's peer reviewed. If it's wrong 5 years later, any aspect, that's fine. Because that's, to be a competent, if you're going to be a qualified court expert, for example, if you want to do that, if you want to be someone who's, your word is taken, respectfully, that's what you have to do. And be prepared to be wrong. Because, if I'm not wrong once a day, then I just wasn't doing enough. So just be prepared to be wrong. Be prepared to be called out on it, and hopefully in a nice way. To be better. That's the whole point of that.
You can always do better, right? That's so true. Thank you so much for all of this sage advice and for sharing so much, Brett. If everyone can see, Brett's handle is right there. So just as he was speaking about, I'm sure he's happy for you to reach out and ask questions, as am I, as is almost everybody. Don't be afraid to talk to people, especially right now with everything being virtual. Reach out over email, reach out over Digital Forensics Discord server, reach out via Twitter, reach out however you can, because you still need to build that community. Reach out to each other in the chat. As I see you guys chatting to each other, maybe you see something that's interesting from, maybe Trey and John were having a little bit of back and forth about some labs. Maybe they need to connect and talk about something now. So just connect with each other. It's absolutely critical what you were saying. And thank you so much, Brett, for taking the time today for Cash Up. And it was awesome getting to chat with you and to be able to help share your wisdom with the community. So just thank you so much for everything you contribute to everyone in this community. It's so awesome. The site is fantastic. The books are wonderful. The case studies are amazing. And just thank you for everything you do to give back.
I think I got back just as much as you got. So I really appreciate this. That was great.
Awesome. And for everybody else, we'll be joining you back again next week. Mary DeGrazia, who is incredible and does incredible teaching, scripting, blogging, and just amazing work in IR, will be our guest at 11 a.m. on June 9th, Eastern Time. So just thanks, everyone, and have a great day.